Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show! Alright, let's start with Theodicy. I don't even know if we're going to get all the way through Theodicy. We're going to be reading it. Let's introduce it real quick. So Theodicy is a rather long story. It's 169 pages, as it is. And it also... So, the writer of Theodicy is the same author as the Empyrean Age and Templar 1. So I actually think that Theodicy can, and more importantly should, be viewed as being kind of the first in that trilogy, right? So it goes Theodicy, Empyrean Age, Templar 1, right? Hold on. There we go. So this is actually kind of an important story, but not a lot of people know about it. Everybody kind of knows about the Templar 1, and everybody knows about Empyrean Age and all that kind of stuff, and even like Inheritance. But Theodicy kind of gets left out. So I've been wanting to do this for a while. Nice. This story takes place before... really before even the events of Concord, right? So this is over 100 years ago. All right. A little bit of backstory. The Minmatar have leaders that are known as elders, and the elders are supposedly the original elders, like the progenitors of their different clans, that developed the method called the Talrog form, where that allows them to pass from body to body, kind of like the Intaki, but in a much more like literal way. And these are kind of like the secret leaders of the Minmatar. However, especially during the Amar occupation, they were scattered. And so at this point, there was a couple of elders that were found in a specific station of an Amar facility. I give to you the destiny of faith, and you will bring its message to every planet of every star in the heavens. Go forth, conquer in my name, and reclaim that which I have given. The Book of Reclaiming, 2213, the Scriptures. And so we watched, those of us who survived, from afar as our home world burned and the legions of evil marched before their sign, herding our people like so much cattle into transports. A life of slavery awaited those cursed souls. It would have been better for them to have never been born. How, dear God, did it come to this? Were these invaders not flesh and bone like us? What evil is this that compels men to commit such horrors against each other? Sebaster Tribe Chronicles, Minmatar Archives, The Path of Krogan. Derelict Region, Aga Constellation, the Hayil System, Daemon Planetesimal, Daemon Mining Complex. 23-2-16 AD. A normal man would have screamed at the scorching agony unleashed by the shock whip. Instead, the slave merely picked up his mining laser off the ground and switched it back on, continuing his work as though nothing had happened. The Amarian guard, staring at the fresh wounds on the man's back, considered delivering a second blow. A slave numb to pain was difficult to control, and besides, replacements were due to arrive at any moment should this one perish. The Reclaiming had conquered the planet Iana yesterday, and hundreds of thousands of repentant pagans were taken prisoner. Those heathens who refused to embrace the faith were dealt swift justice by the Emperor's holy paladins. The guard wound his arm back and struck again. Sparks exploded from the slave's back, and this time he crumpled to the ground in a heap. The cauterized wounds intersected the previous mark, creating an approximate visage of the sign. The beauty of the faith, the guard thought, is that it offers a path for the unborn. Paradise was the exclusive birthright of pure-blooded Amarians, but for all others, including the Matari wretch lying at his feet, salvation had to be earned. Only through suffering can the unborn rise from the shadow of death to gain the blessing of immortality. I might yet walk in heaven with this one, the guard thought. His subservience speaks mountains of his quest for forgiveness. Just as his arm drew back to strike a third time, the guard's earpiece squawked. A slave transport was about to land, and he was to assist in the processing of new arrivals. There were glaive collars to be fitted, labor tasks to be assigned, and mining equipment to be issued. He looked downward at the slave, now crawling along the dirt and gravel. Yes, this one shall see paradise soon enough. Sheathing the shock whip, the guard turned and started back towards the section's lifts. Reaching across the cavern walls for support, the slave struggled to pull himself back to his feet. Waves of excruciating pain pulsed through his wiry frame, as he was terrified of each surge, not for physical torment, but for the cruel reminder that death continued to elude him. If there was a time in this man's life that was not plagued by anguish, then its memory had long since been lost. Besides pain, all he knew was that he was damned for his crime of not being Amarian by birth, and that the equipment now in his hands were the key to his salvation. The escape from hell lies beyond these walls, the paladin had told them. Use the laser to burrow through them, saving the hemerphite that the cavern yields as an offering to God. Switching the device on, he plunged the laser into the rock before him, working the beam from left to right, searching for the precious ore and praying for forgiveness. A searing heat erupted from the mysterious device that until now had been laid dormant inside of the slave's stomach. The pain swelled suddenly and then exploded in all directions at once. The mining drill fell to the ground as the slave clutched his abdomen and dropped to his knees. Then a second source of scathing heat originated from deep inside his skull, as if molten metal was injected behind his eyes. Writhing on the ground in convulsion, he could feel the scalding liquid course through his bloodstream, incinerating everything in his path. At the peak of his agony, a blinding flash overwhelmed the slave's vision. He unleashed a deafening scream, and its fervent pitch camarned through the pits and catacombs of the mine. But the reverberation assaulting the eardrums of countless slaves was not the shriek of a man in pain. It was the fiery shrill of the battlefield war cry. The fire that flowed through his veins had become the source of pure, exhilarating strength. Rising to his feet, the slave patted his skull and stomach down for wounds, but found none. He knew that he was just transformed into something inhuman, something stronger and more powerful than he could ever imagine. His hands latched firmly onto the glaive collar, gripping his neck. Immediately, he could feel the device puncture his skin and inject the lethal toxins into his artery, but the poisons that should have crippled him and then killed him had no effect. With a sharp metallic crack, the collar shattered from sheer strength of the man's hands. Slaves gathered and watched in amazement as he removed the broken syringe needles from his neck and cast them harmlessly aside. Now keenly aware of his powers, he heard the voice of someone he had never met, but commanded his devout, absolute obedience. "Awaken, Mimitar! They have our elders." The slave had shook his head in despair, clutching his own skull as though it had been about to break apart. There was immediate clarity of purpose in his life. The voice came from inside, but he knew it was born from a single mission. "They have taken them here, Mimitar. They are hidden among those who have just arrived." Immediately, he felt the presence of the elders nearby and knew that the voice was truthful. His memory reached back in time to the exact moment when the Amarian guards was poised to strike him a third time, to the radio squawking in his earpiece. The slave mind amplified the sound, processing his words, and learned that in that instance that the elders were being held in the landing bay just beyond the mines. "You must go to them now." The urgency of his voice betrayed the presence of the shockwhip's charged lance screaming across towards his back. Time slowed down to a crawl. Sidestepping the whip, he pivoted on one foot towards his attacker and lunged with an outstretched arm in a single blurred motion. The slave felt his own tightened hand rip through the throat of his assailant. The Amarian guard fell, life spraying through the gruesome wound of his neck. No time was wasted savoring the delicious moment of revenge. Instead, the slave turned and started to run. The inspired crowd, recognizing this opportunity, erupted into frenzy and ran after him. "Hurry, Mimitar! Time runs out for us all." 3 more guards died instant, violent deaths as they tried to stop the rogue slave. Behind him, the crowd had grown to an uncomfortable riot. Shedding their mining drills and running blindly onward, the mob sought Amarian blood to spill, but found only the mangled remains left by the powerful one who had gone ahead. Reaching the great doors of the landing bay, the slave crushed the sternum of his next victim with a single strike. The radio on the corpse announced a terse warning. "His glaive collar has been removed. Disperse rifles to your squads and fire at will. Open the doors, Mimitar." In a whirl of motions, he pressed the dead man's palm against the glass console and typed a 5-digit sequence. The slave never considered how he might have possibly known what the code was. The mighty doors opened, and there before him stood hundreds of Mimitar men, women, and children. The elders were amongst them. "Come to us, Mimitar." A bolt of fire slammed into his chest with a terrific force. The sound of the shot caused the crowd to scream in panic. Feeling no pain, he took another step forward. Again, another powerful impact pushed him backwards. But instead of falling into his own space, he was swept forward into the wrathful crowd of rioting slaves rushed past. Staggering through the fray, the slave ignored the madness, desperately seeking the elders who had summoned him from his sleep. Death was everywhere, but his eyes locked onto the frail figure of a hooded man moving a slow, ethereal glide through the struggle. Everything hangs in the balance. The destiny of worlds rests in the outcome of these days. Warn the others that the remaining elders must not perish. Send this message with haste. Immortality awaits. Mimitar, go! And the slave could feel pain again, but not from the bullet wounds in his chest, but the searing torture originating from the pit of his stomach returned. And the elder disappeared into the chaos. Suddenly aware of its own mortality, the slave broke through towards the lifts that would take him to the surveillance posts at the surface of the mines. He ran through crowds with flashing knives and spilt blood, past men clutching at their glaive collars with one hand and bashing Amarians with the other. With abdominal pain intensifying every step, he hurled himself into the lift and shut the door. The elevator began rocketing upward amidst a hail of bullets. Guards filled into the second lift and gave chase. The pain spread upwards through his solar plexus, and tinges of agony began radiating through the gaping wounds of his chest and back. A computerized voice announced a warning that the lift shot past the gravity zone. Then came the nausea, and in a violent heave dotted with blood and serum, a small metallic sphere was forcibly expelled from his mouth just as the lift stopped. Summoning as much strength as he could from his final effort, the slave grabbed the tiny device and pulled himself out. Bullets scorched overhead as he bounded towards the airlock entrance. The inner doors opened, and with the press of several keys, he ensured that they would not close behind him. Air pressure alerts echoes throughout the cavern. Amber-colored warning lights flashed, and sirens wailed as he waited for the exact moment to open the outer seal. The slave heard a deafening whoosh, then silence. As his lung imploded, his last image to be processed by his failing brain was the sight of Amarian guards hurled through the opening of the in the surface below. The tiny device, encased in the death grip of the nameless slave, flashed once before converting every atom of its mass into an immensely powerful energy pulse that traversed light years of space-time in an instant. The celestial event registered on the instruments of exactly 4 ships. In that single moment, the course of history was altered forever. I will not hesitate when the test of faith finds me, for only the strongest conviction will open the gates of paradise. My faith in you is absolute. My sword is yours. My faith is absolute. My sword is yours, my God, and your will guides me now and for all of eternity. The Prophet Kuriya, Paladin's Creed. It is said that cowardice lurks behind power, and that every tyrant ruler fears the day in which his subjects learn where the source of real power lies. What better way for an emperor to hide that truth than by claiming the will of deities and threatening divine consequence to those who question it? The Elder Tome, Matari Chronicles. Until then, I've been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put Eve into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you all so much for coming and hanging out. A lot of people would suspect that not a lot of people would want to sit here and go through all of this lore, but I think that together we're proving them wrong. So thank you guys for your support, your views, your likes, your shares, your comments. It means so much, both to me, the channel, and all of the people whose lives are touched by my work, by helping make EVE a better place, by increasing player literacy of EVE Online, because that's the whole point. That's what we're all here for. So, without further ado, I've been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and I'll see you in space.